Good afternoon. We're having a talk on enhancing the value of water by Huw Pohlner from Aither.
Thanks, Andrea. Hi, everyone. My name's Huw Pohlner. I'm a consultant with an advisory firm called Aither. So we've been working with the Australian Water Partnership and the Department of Foreign Affairs in Australia to develop a bit of a guide and some steps to how we think the Australian experience might inform improved water management around the world. And we're doing that through the lens of value and valuing water. So I'm just going to introduce a bit of what we've been doing with AWP today. So what does valuing water mean? The value of water is the benefit that people receive from water, and that's all people, including people that are yet to be born, so future generations. And we acknowledge that people make value judgments about how they use water every day, from the individual level to the government level. And sometimes those value judgments are informed by data or other sources of information, and sometimes they're less informed. So based on the knowledge that people make implicit valuations of water all the time, we're suggesting that there might be some benefits to be had in more explicitly determining what the value of water is and making rational decisions that reflect that value of water. And we think that Australia's reform journey potentially has some lessons for other countries and other community contexts in how the value of water can be revealed and reflected in decision making. So these are the steps that we have developed in draft form at the moment, and we're very much open to people really asking us hard questions about these and helping us to further develop this framework. So we think there are 6 key elements that grow out of the Australian experience that we think go beyond just talking about the history of what Australia has done in the past, but try to capture some of the elemental components of what the Australian experience can, how that can actually be transferred beyond our context. So first of all, we think there's a need for the water resource to be determined. So this is the supply side. So what is water availability now? What is water availability projected to be in the future? What are the risks to present water supply? And then based on that knowledge of supply, the second step basically adds in the demand side. What techniques can we use to estimate water demand now and to project that into the future as well? And then through that assessment of demand, make an assessment of the value of water as it is represented for multiple users within the river basin or whatever geographical scale we're looking at. Thirdly, we think there's a need on the basis of that knowledge of supply and of demand now and in the future to accurately reflect what we've learned about the value of water in administrative allocation decisions. So by administrative allocation decisions, we mean decisions made by governments about how water is allocated at a macro scale between different classes of user and different locations of users. So based on what we know about how much water there is and is likely to be in the future and what the demand for that water is, how can we reflect what we know about value in decision making at the government scale? Then fourthly, we think there's a need to having theoretically allocated water to people to ensure that actually people can access that water and that their rights to that water are well defined and are secure. So this ties in clearly water infrastructure in terms of being able to access water, but also a system of water rights that is where people's right to water is excludable and is secure now and into the future. Then fifthly, we think there's a need to introduce settings to optimize water allocation use. So this is where some of the Australian experience around the introduction of water trading, cost-reflective water pricing, potentially has some relevance outside Australia in terms of seeking to based on administrative allocation that has been made at the government level to potentially move the dial somewhat towards involving individuals in making decisions about how they use the water that is available to them. And so by moving away from purely perhaps a totally government-led administrative decision-making process to finding ways to incorporate individuals in making decisions about their water use, we think there's possibilities there to optimize water use. And so, for example, in Australia, in the Murray-Darling Basin, the introduction of a water market and water trading has, to a large extent, allowed people to make decisions about their need, their requirement, and their demand for water at a particular time, a particular season, and either to use that water for growing crops in that given year, or to perhaps trade that water away if they think that there's going to be more value to them in trading that water to somebody that has a higher value for that water in that given season or year. And then underlying all of this, not so much a step, but really a process that undergirds all of these sort of sequential 5 steps that we've outlined here, is a need for ongoing adaptive and participatory management. So it's fair enough to make an assessment about how much water there is using modelling techniques and data, and then to talk about, to make an assessment of demand and to make decisions on that basis. But I think the experience in Australia shows that there's a clear need for community involvement, and that just by presenting somebody with the science, it doesn't therefore necessarily follow that they're going to wholeheartedly agree with your allocation decisions that have been made on the basis of that science. So there's a clear need for adaptive management and for community participation in decision making, and then for monitoring of progress and enforcing the decisions that have been made around allocation. So that's a bit of an introduction to the 6 steps, and we've developed a lot more content under each of these, which again is draft and is open to discussion, and we're very interested in hearing people's input on this. And essentially we've followed this sort of a framework of getting to the real objective that we're seeking to meet through that particular step in improving water management, listing the outcomes from water management from that step, and then really putting together a bit of a menu of policy options for how different governments and communities might actually be able, what can actually be done to get towards that objective within that step. And then lastly, looking at what the inputs are required. So for example, in step 1, there's clear need for capacity around modelling and assessment of the water resource. So there's a need for professional capacity in the water bureaucracy and in industry. So we've gone through that for all of the steps, and I won't go through that today, but we'd be happy to talk about that and share that with all of you anytime you like. And just to note that why we're doing this with the Australian Water Partnership is that Australia is a member of a 10-country high-level panel on water chaired by the UN and World Bank that's designed to progress outcomes on Sustainable Development Goal 6, the water goal, over the next 2 years. So it's got a clear time frame, and it's designed to take action at the highest political level and to push things forward towards progress towards Sustainable Development Goal 6. And valuing water is a component that the panel is focusing on, and it's something that Australia is very keen to make a contribution in. So Aither is working with the Australian Water Partnership to try and take some steps toward understanding what does valuing water mean, and how can we reflect that in decision-making processes in a way that's going to be useful for other communities and other countries to pick up on. So I'll leave it there, but we very much welcome any feedback that anybody has now, or any questions now. We're also happy to have a conversation in the future about it. Thank you.